Hellcat.
Hello and welcome back to the channel, and once again we're reviewing another Saturn game. Now I'm going to try and remain positive throughout the review after I suffered a really bad knee injury playing football the other day. Not too sure the exact extent of it yet, other than there was a horrific snapping noise and followed by excruciating pain. But anyway, today's game is the 3D platformer Croc, which came out in October of 1997, making it, to be fair, one of the much later Saturn games, because there weren't too many that came out after that over here in the PAL region. Now the game follows Croc, who's located by a group of animals known as Gobbos after he's floating down the river, and they take him under their wing. He grows, they look after him, and the next thing you know, he's fully grown and he's massive in size to them. Now everything seems happy when all of a sudden the bad guy, Baron Dante, and all of his minions appear, and they decide they're going to take over the Gobbos. They're going to capture them and terrorize them completely. Thankfully, Croc manages to escape via a little bird known as Beanie, and before he knows it, all the Gobbos, including the Gobbo King, have been kidnapped, and it is his job to go through every single level on the game and trying to rescue them and restore peace and harmony to the land. Now, one thing straight away that Croc didn't really have was originality. I wouldn't really say it was an original story, and aspects of the game are clearly borrowed from other games. You've got Croc's butt drop, which is borrowed from Mario. You've got the idea that he collects gems to stay alive when he gets hit, which is really similar to Sonic. You've got a tail attack, which is really similar to Gex. And you've got the way he grabs on platforms and climbs up, which is incredibly similar to that game known as Tomb Raider. But what Croc does do is blend all of those together to present you with a relatively nice, relatively appealing, relatively good 3D platforming adventure. So the idea of each level is pretty straightforward. There are 6 Gobbos trapped within each level. 5 of them are located throughout the standard part of the level. The final Gobbo is located through the optional exit of the game, where if you collect the 5 different gems, you can unlock a door, and then you can find the 6th Gobbo in there and hit the second gong, which will complete the level fully. Completing all of the levels with 6 Gobbos will open up the additional levels throughout the game for you to play. And there are 5 different worlds. There is quite a lot of levels on each one, and thankfully they're all varied. They've all got nice variety to them. They've all got a really good feel to them. So onto the nitty gritty of how it looks, how it sounds, how it plays, what kind of lifespan it has, and how it holds up all these years later. Now thankfully Croc, when it came out, was a pretty good looking 3D game, and actually it holds up pretty well to this day. It's definitely one of the best looking 3D games on the Saturn in my opinion. All the areas are pretty well done. Croc himself is well done. He's well animated, he looks good. I can't really fault anything about the 3D graphics of the game. Yes, the camera view can make them seem a little bit glitchy at times. You might see through bits of polygons here and there, but it's not game breaking. It's definitely not anything to criticize. Mainly, the good thing is about this game was that all the 3D environments were quite small. It wasn't one big open area, so that meant there wasn't as much memory being used, so it wasn't much of a struggle. So what they had on the screen, they could make it look genuinely really good. Small gripes might be the fact the shadows underneath Croc, the mesh effect shadow that is, of course, comes and goes a little bit. It's a bit inconsistent. It's definitely not terribly bad, it's just noticeable. And also when you have cutscenes at points in the game, you will notice the shadows there are completely dark. The shadows that I much prefer, and I've mentioned that in other videos, but for some reason during the game they're not. Not sure why that is. A little bit inconsistent. Again, not a game breaker, just something that I noticed myself personally. And the only other flaw I could probably say graphically is the fact the game is quite dark. The colours just all seem fairly dark on the game, even on the lighter, brighter levels. And I compared it with the PlayStation, and the PlayStation version is just genuinely a brighter experience. I'm not sure why they made the Saturn version darker. All in all though, graphically, it looks good. The graphics are detailed, they're well animated. genuinely is a good looking 3D Saturn game. And apart from the little niggles, I would definitely say it is a really, really good looking Sega Saturn game. How does Croc sound? Well, thankfully Croc sounds absolutely fantastic. Whoever came up with the soundtrack, the sound effects for this game, did an absolutely brilliant job, because all the music tracks for each level, they are distinct, they are unique, they fit the game brilliantly, and they give you a great atmosphere for each level. They all suit each level that they're on, and I genuinely can't praise the soundtrack enough for Croc. I just think it's absolutely brilliant. They nailed it spot on. It's probably the biggest strength of the game. I always think it's great having music that suits the game, that fits the game. It's really good, and you've got no problems whatsoever listening to any of these tracks when you play the game. All the sound effects, again, they're all fantastic as well. The noises Croc makes, the ones his enemies make, the sounds for collecting your hearts and your gems, they're all spot on. I don't think I could say a single bad thing about the soundtrack for Croc. That is high. That is how highly I rate the soundtrack for Croc. I absolutely think it is top quality stuff. But of course, for how good a game looks and how good a game sounds, there always has to be how good does it play. And this is where Croc will probably create some divided opinions. It plays like a tank style control system, so a Resident Evil style control system. If you hold forward on the D-pad, you move forward. If you hold left, you turn left. If you hold right, you turn right. If you hold backwards, you step backwards. Now, you get used to this using a D-pad. I don't have a problem with the way it plays. What it does create is problems when you're later on in the game and you need to make quicker paced jumps and turn directions. It's a little bit tricky. It can result in death after death, falling off platforms and ledges. Sometimes you can't quite judge a jump correctly because of it, because of the camera as well. The camera's a bit iffy at times, and that can affect the way it plays without a doubt. I'm not saying it plays terribly. I genuinely think it plays okay if you use the D-pad. If you use the 3D analog controller, it becomes much more difficult to play, because it seems really hard to get Croc to move in just a straight line. Obviously, the Saturn's analog stick is poor. It's definitely not good. I would 100% recommend playing this game with the D-pad. It is too difficult, too hard to control, and too sloppy if you use the analog stick. It's genuinely not a bad playing game, but you've got to get used to the way it plays, I think. Thankfully, you can flip and turn with the C button, which is helpful. B button's your jump button, A button's your attack. It's got pretty standard platforming controls, in all fairness. It's just a question of getting used to it. You've got step right and step left with RNL, which is very similar to Tomb Raider. Obviously, I mentioned that near the start of the video. It borrows elements from different games, but it does blend them together fairly well. It does play reasonably well, but I do feel you can have a lot of irritating deaths due to the control system, and the further on you get in the game, the harder it gets. The other flaw of the way it plays is the swimming levels. Croc controls absolutely diabolically in the water levels. There is no enjoyment to have whatsoever in the water levels on this game. I despise them, I hate them, and I really, really mean that. They are absolutely the biggest flaw of this game. The way Croc controls under the water is shocking. He's unresponsive, he doesn't turn properly, and they bring the game down a fair whack, in all fairness. So yeah, you're going to have to just grit your teeth to get through those parts of the game, especially you get a boss fight underwater as well. That is irritating and frustrating. I just can't pretend anything other than that. Overall, the game plays okay, but the factors that I've said seriously do affect your enjoyment at parts throughout the game. So what kind of lifespan can you expect from Croc? Now, Croc has 5 different worlds, like I mentioned earlier on. There's over 40 levels. I think there's about 10 different bosses in the game as well. So there is definitely a lot to sink your teeth into. There's secret levels to unlock, if you can unlock all the Gobbos on every level as well. So that adds to it. And as well, if you want to see the real ending, you need to collect all of those Gobbos. So there's definitely incentive to do all of the levels to their full. There's plenty of variety in the levels as well. I think they're all on different settings. You've got underwater ones, glacier ones, volcano ones. I think there's genuine variety in the game. The game plays reasonably well for the majority, like I mentioned. it can get frustrating, and that's what turns me off on the game, and that's what stops me from playing it for long periods of time. If I'm playing it and I get frustrated from cheap deaths and bad control systems or water levels, that's what only puts me off. If you can get past that, Croc offers you a pretty lengthy experience. If I'm perfectly honest, it's definitely a pretty chunky game. There's a lot to it, so I think the lifespan is genuinely good with Croc. As always, the big question is Croc worth playing in this day and age? Now, the big question for me is going to be the price tag, because if you pick it up from CEX, it's going to cost you £28. If you want a copy that you know is in good condition and is complete, you're going to be paying in excess of £30, maybe even £40 for it off eBay, and that's a huge sticking point because obviously it came out on the PlayStation as well, and if you want to get a copy of that, that's only going to set you back £8 from CEX. My PS1 copy only cost me $3.99 from World of Books, so for me, Croc isn't worth buying on the Saturn. It's worth buying on the PlayStation because it is a far cheaper game and it plays just as well. It might even be a little bit better on the PlayStation. Maybe I'll take a look at that in the future in a comparisons video. But the game itself, it looks good. It's got a great soundtrack and sound effects. It plays okay in places and frustratingly in other places. But probably for me, the price tag is the sticking point, and it's really up to you whether you want to go out and buy it. Obviously, if you've got an ODE or anything like that and you can just play a ROM, it's definitely worth giving it a go. You may well persevere through those tricky levels better than myself, but if you're buying a physical copy, yeah, be warned, it's going to set you back a few bob. What are your opinions on Croc? How well do you think it stacks up in the Saturn's pecking order of games? Let me know down below in the comments. Maybe like and even subscribe to the channel and follow my quest to complete my PAL collection. That is all for today. Thank you for watching, and I shall be back very soon with another Saturn review. Goodbye for now.